Good morning. How's everybody doing? Dr. Chris Roddenberry coming to you from my office again, live here in the huge metropolis of Willow Spring, North Carolina. How's everybody doing today? It's good to see you. Very, very good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Looks like we had a couple of people on the broadcast. One of them bailed out just a second ago. We're gonna wait a moment and see if everybody can get logged in. How are y'all doing today? Anybody in the audience? Go ahead and type in the chat bar and say good morning to me. Let me know you're there. I got my coffee. I drink too much of that. I got my water because sometimes I need to drink a little bit of water. And it looks like we got Caleb McMillan in the audience. Good morning, Caleb. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. And we have Matthew Moreda. Hey, Matt. It's good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well, too. Thanks for tuning in to the lecture. It's always nice to have students come in and say hello to me. It's really, really good to see you. Yesterday in our lecture, we were talking about Sigmund Freud and psychodynamic psychology. And it's kind of interesting because I ran across this yesterday. Sophie Freud, the granddaughter of Sigmund Freud, died in Boston Friday. And it turns out that she was also a psychologist as well. Freud, some of his kids and grandchildren, because Freud was so famous, they became psychologists as well. And if you read her obituary, it actually says that she didn't like some of Freud's teachings. If you remember yesterday, I said Freud was kind of a sexist psychologist. Sophie Freud was a feminist and actually rejected publicly in some books some of the stuff that Freud said. Not a big deal. I don't know why I'm telling you this other than we talked about Freud yesterday, and I saw that his granddaughter had died. So I thought that was sort of interesting, and I thought I'd bring that up to you. Okay. So today we are going to talk, it's our second day on lectures. And if you remember from yesterday, I was talking to you about the psychodynamic and humanist perspectives on personality. I was asking that question, where does personality come from? Why do people do the things they do? Why does a person grow up to be a bully? Why do they do mean things? Well, it might depend upon what happened to them early in their life. And I suggested to you that people's personality, there are some psychologists who believe that people's personality is greatly affected by the things that happen early in their life. That was sort of the psychodynamic perspective. And I'm going to want you to kind of have an idea of what these different theoretical perspectives on personality were. I want you to be familiar with Freud and Adler and Abraham Maslow. So when you go to a cocktail party and somebody mentions these people, you'll know who they are and what they do. And great. Now, today we're actually going to work on a different objective. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about personality, but we're going to talk about it from a different angle. Instead of asking the question, what forces does shape personality? Where does personality come from? Instead of asking those questions, we're instead going to ask the question, what does personality look like? How can I tell if you're neurotic or if you're conscientious or if you're an angry person or if you're a friendly person? We're going to talk about personality testing. How many of you have ever taken a personality test online before? Anybody ever taken a funny little personality test that tells you what kind of person you are? Okay. Anybody? I see we have 3 viewers in the audience. I got Caleb, Matthew. Is there somebody else? Have you ever had your personality tested? This week, we're going to talk a little bit about personality tests. In your discussion board, I've actually got a link to what I consider to be the most scientifically valid personality test online, the Big 5 test. And I want you to take that and then talk about what your scores mean to the rest of the class. Okay. And then in webinar, if you come to the webinar on Wednesday night, we're going to take a different type of personality test called a thematic apperception test, a TAC test, and that's going to measure your personality a different way. And so what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about how personality tests are constructed and what they can tell us about our personality. It looks like Caleb and Matthew have both taken personality tests, and we look like we have Ivelisse jumping into the broadcast. Fantastic. Thanks for coming. And Johanna, as always, thanks for coming, Johanna. It is great to see you. I really appreciate you coming to class this morning. Okay, now, here's the deal. Probably one of the older approaches to personality was developed by this fellow named Hans Eysenck. And I would suggest to you that he's kind of what we might call a biological approach to personality. If you think about it, it makes sense. Where does personality come from? Well, it comes from the brain, right? Your brain creates everything about you. Of course, personality should come from your brain. So probably one of the older approaches to personality testing was developed by this fellow named Hans Eysenck. Your book talks about him. There are other old people that are even a little bit older in terms of personality development, but he's one of the older approach. And he had a special interest in explaining variations in what he called extroversion and introversion. Now, there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system that maintains, that is responsible for exciting you, making you more aroused or less aroused. And he thought that this part of your brain was probably responsible for personality. In his opinion, if you had a very sensitive reticular activating system, you probably didn't need a lot of stimulation. And so you were probably an introvert. Introverted people like quiet things and they don't like being around crowds. He said that's probably because these people have a very sensitive reticular activating system that doesn't need much stimulation. On the other hand, some people are more extroverted. They love parties, they love people, they love loud noises and loud music. He argued maybe these people have a reticular activating system, actually it's down here, that is not as sensitive, and so it needs more stimulation. So he argued that we can think of personality as originating in different parts of the brain and personality differences as developing because different parts of the brain are different in different people. And so he developed probably definitely the first biologically based theory of personality. Okay, now back in his day, we didn't have a lot of technologies to allow us to measure the interior of brains and see if his theory was actually true. But you know what? There has been sort of a biological history in the study of personality, and there is research to suggest that personality does have a biological basis. It turns out that if you look at people's personalities and compare them to their parents, their brothers and sisters, and their cousins, what you're going to find is that there appears to be a genetic basis for personality. If your mom is neurotic, my mom was a very anxious, angry, nervous person. And you know what? I'm an anxious, angry, nervous person. I got that from my mom's genes. I'm also a very extroverted, fun-loving guy. My dad is a clown. And so I probably got that part of my personality from him as well. It turns out that there is definitely a genetic component to our personality. So Eysenck, in a certain way, was right that personality is biologically based. Now, there's other research to suggest that narcissists and people with antisocial personality disorder, they've had that linked to different parts of the brain, but that's beyond the scope of this class. In fact, I saw a news article yesterday saying that the basal ganglia could be implicated in people who are sociopaths, again, outside the area of this class. But the first approach to personality was trying to figure out what parts of the brain controlled personality, okay? And so that's one approach to personality. Your book's going to talk about the evolutionary approach to personality. Some people actually say that personality has evolved to allow us to interact and be successful as organisms in our environment. We're going to take the Big Five personality test, and this fellow named David Buss, who's an evolutionary psychologist, argues that extroversion, introversion, conscientiousness, if you will, have evolved because they help our species. If you think about it, our species needs to work together and cooperate in order to be successful in the animal kingdom. And so things like extroversion and agreeableness are personality traits that allow us to work well together as social animals. And so that's an interesting way of looking at personality. In fact, did you know some people have attempted to measure the personality of dogs, and it appears that dogs can be measured on a test similar to the Big Five. You actually don't ask the dog, you ask their owner to describe them. And there are some people who believe that dogs have 4 personality traits, not 5 personality traits. So there is evidence to suggest that personality might have some genetic or biological component. Now, let's actually talk about testing personality. Let's describe what personality is first. Personality is your unique constellation or group of consistent behavioral traits. Okay, how do you react to a certain stimulus that is different from other people? Have you ever went to a movie and you thought the movie was absolutely hilarious and the friend beside you thought that the movie was stupid and boring? That might be related to your personality. Have you ever gone out to a party and you really like this person, and the friend that your boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever that went to the party with you hates that person? Personality is the unique way in which each individual person responds to their environment. So if I am a disagreeable person and somebody starts giving me some advice, I may tell them to shut up. On the other hand, if I'm with my wife, who's a very agreeable person, she will listen and take their advice, right? So personality is the characteristic way in which each of us respond to the world around us, okay? Now, there are 2 basic types of personality tests. There are self-report tests, which is where I ask you to tell me about your personality. How extroverted are you? How agreeable are you? How angry do you get in this situation and that situation? I ask you to directly tell me what your personality is like. This is what's known as a self-report test of personality. All of you that reported taking tests online probably took a self-report test of personality. The Big Five test that you're going to take for your discussion board activity this week is a self-report inventory, a self-report test of personality. Now, if you come to the Wednesday night webinar, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of a projective test of personality, and we're going to actually take one of those in the Wednesday webinar. And the weird thing with a projective personality test is I give you a situation and I watch you behave in that situation, and then I try to guess what your personality is like. So what I might do, in fact, for the TAT test, the thematic apperception test, I'm going to give you a picture of a scenario of 2 people in a scenario. You're going to tell me a story about what those people are doing, and I'm going to guess your personality based upon the type of story that you tell me. And so there are 2 main types of personality tests: self-report tests of personality and projective tests of personality. From now on, when someone asks you to take a self-report test of personality, you should be able to know whether it's a self-report or a projective test of personality. Have any of you ever taken a test called the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? Anybody taken that? If you have, go ahead and type in the chat bar and let me know if you have. Okay, anybody? If you have, I'm going to ask you to tell me whether or not it was a self-report or a projective test of personality. There's only 4 of us in class today, so maybe nobody has. But usually in a class of 20, 3 or 4 people at least have taken the MBTI. But don't worry about it. Now, here's the deal. A personality test is a tool for measuring personality. What's a tool for measuring length? A tape measure, right? A tape measure measures how long things are. A bathroom scale measures how much people weigh. Those are measurement tools. Now, although it's measuring personality, A personality test is a tool for measuring things just like a bathroom scale and a tape measure. It measures your personality. And so, just like we want a bathroom scale to give us an accurate measurement, just like we want a tape measure to give us an accurate measure, just like we want our speedometer to tell us exactly how fast our car is going, we want a personality test to give us an accurate measurement of people's personality. And so there are four qualities of personality tests that I'm quickly going to mention. And the first one is described by this picture over here. It's called reliability. The first thing we want to do, even more important than whether or not it gives us the exact measurement, we want to make sure that the test measures us reliably. So if you look over here at the far left screen, you'll notice that what we have are a set of people: Pam, Tyrone, Deb, Kiko, Maria, Dave, Ed, and Dawn, and they're all taking a personality test. And they take that personality test twice. Now, their individual scores may change a little bit from the first time to the second time, but what we want that test to do is to keep those people in order, to give us the same general measurement each time. So you'll notice whatever that personality test is measuring, Dawn is the lowest on that personality score the first time and the second time. Pam is the highest on that personality trait the first time and the second time. And each and every person stays relatively the same every time they take that personality test. If you look at the second graph, you'll see that this personality test is very unreliable because Dawn scores the lowest on it the first time, but close to the top on the second time. On the other hand, Tyrone scores almost the highest on that personality trait the first time, but on the second time, he scores the lowest. These test scores are all over the place. One of the things about the Big Five that you're going to take is that your test score is going to give you the same general measure. If you take it today and 1 year from now, you're going to find that it gives you generally the same scores. That's called the test reliability. The second thing we want to make sure is that the test is valid. Does it actually measure your personality accurately? Let's go back to the bathroom scale. I know I weigh about 154 pounds. When I jump on the scale at the doctor's office, it says 154. I come home, I know my score is 154. If I jump on my bathroom scale here at the house and it says I weigh 185, I know that my bathroom scale is not valid. It's not giving me an accurate measure. And so validity refers to how accurate the test is. And you know what? I would say that the Big Five test that you're going to take is pretty dadgum accurate. So reliability and validity are two qualities of all measurement tools. Quickly, the standardization is just basically, do you get the same test if you take it here or in another state? So it refers to the uniform procedures used to administer and score a test. When you take the Big Five test, everybody's going to take it the exact same way. And so it's going to be a very standardized test. And then norms. One of the things you're going to find when you take the Big Five test is it's going to compare you to people who are your age and your sex. So we can tell, are you an extroverted 32-year-old male compared to other 32-year-old males? Are you a very conscientious 16-year-old female compared to all other 16-year-old females? Test norms allow us to compare ourselves to others to find out who is the most extroverted, who is the most conscientious, who is the most agreeable, etc., etc. So these are sort of the characteristics of personality tests. Now, a self-report test, as I mentioned to you earlier, in a self-report test, what I do is I directly ask you. And when you take the Big Five test today, what you're going to find is that test is going to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, from 1 being never, not at all, to 5 being most of the time, what you're going to do is you're going to answer how you would react in certain situations. I'm going to specifically ask you about situations where you could be extroverted or introverted. And you're going to give me a number that represents your feeling about how you would act in that situation. I'm asking you to report on yourself. That's a self-report test of personality. And the NEO inventory, actually that's the official name for the Big Five, developed by Costa and McCrae, is designed to measure the big five traits in research and clinical settings. So we use it in research to correlate people's personality to certain life outcomes. And we also use it when we're diagnosing psychological disorders and school related disorders to see how people are. And in fact, you're even going to see some jobs. I don't know if any of you have ever gone to a job where they gave you a personality test. They just want to see if you're the kind of person that can fit in with their group. Now, we're not going to take that, but the NEO measures 5 traits. If you look over at this picture, this is the one that's included in your textbook, so I put it in here for interest. This is what's known as the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, developed by a fellow named Raymond Cattell and some colleagues. And you'll notice that he measures 16 different traits. There are lots of different self-report tests. Some of them, like Ising's test, measure 3 traits. The Big Five measures 5 personality traits. Raymond Cattell measures 16 traits. And really, it just depends upon how you want to measure personality. Do you want to look at it in simpler terms, or do you want to look at it in more complex terms? And so the number of traits will vary from test to test. But if a test is valid, so for example, in the 16 personality factor test tells you whether or not you're reserved or outgoing. That's like extroversion or introversion. If you score high on the Big Five for extroversion, the 16 personality factor probably ought to say you're extroverted as well, or you're outgoing as opposed to reserved. So in a sense, there are different ways to parse or divide up personality styles. And the one that is most popular, the one that's online that I think is valid and reliable that I'm going to give you, is the NEO inventory, or the Big Five. The test you're going to take is called the NEO-IPIP. I forget what all the acronym stands for, but you're going to take the NEO-IPIP, which is just a form of the Big Five personality test. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the Big Five because you are going to be taking it this week. It was developed by McCrae and Costa. Don't need to know their names, but it measures your personality on 5 basic traits. How extroverted are you? Are you outgoing and love social interaction, or do you prefer quiet and sticking to yourself? How neurotic are you? Are you an anxious, angry person? I actually tend to be a little bit anxious and tend to have a bad temper, so I'm a little bit neurotic. Openness to experience. How conventional are you? Do you like new ideas? Do you like art? Do you like to feel your emotions? Or are you a conventional person that really likes things the way they are and don't like to think outside the box? Are you open to experience? Are you agreeable? Are you willing to give up what you want in order to maintain the peace in a group? Or are you that hard-headed person that always argues with people of the group so you can get your way? How extroverted are you? Agreeable are you? And conscientiousness. How much self-control do you have? How powerful do you feel about yourself as an individual? Are you high in conscientious? Or are you low in conscientiousness? It turns out that conscientiousness is probably going to predict your grades in college, because people who are highly conscientious are going to do their studying. They're going to make sure they do their homeworks. They're going to come to class. And if you're like me, low in conscientiousness, you might skip class or forget about your homework, okay? Now, I mentioned genetic links in the Big Five inventory. Since the Big Five is the most popular, a lot of research has been done on the heritability or the genetic qualities of personality. And what they do is they use what's known as twin studies. So what I'll do is I'll have you and your identical twins who you share 100% of your genetic material with, and I'll compare you and your scores with maybe fraternal twins or siblings, and you share 25% of your genetic material with your brothers and sisters who aren't identical twins, and then you share about 10% of the genetic material with your cousins. And so what we do is we give people who have different levels of family connection the IQ test, the Big Five test, and we see how similar people are and correlate that to their genetic similarity. Okay, and so what we find is that the heritability of Big Five traits is very, very strong, okay? And, sometimes what we'll do is we'll even measure identical twins or siblings who are raised apart. Maybe their parents got divorced and each one took a kid. Maybe kids were adopted and sent to different families. And you know what? Even if you are raised in a different family than another person, if you share the same genetic material, your personality test is going to be similar. I'm sorry, I keep saying IQ test because IQ tests show a genetic quality as well. And what I want you to know that the heritability of the big five traits is very, very strong. 40-50% is a very strong measure, to be quite honest. Now, that means that there are going to be differences between you and your identical twins, but there's going to be more similarities than there are differences, okay? And I really hope that you take the Big Five personality test and think about what it means. You know, the crazy thing is the internet's relatively new, and I did not have a chance to take the Big Five test online until I was 35. That's 17 years ago. And I took the test one night, and it said that I was a very neurotic person. And I showed the personality test to my wife, and I said, "Can you believe how inaccurate this test is? It says I'm a neurotic person." My wife busted out laughing. She said, "That is the most accurate description of you I have ever seen." And I was like, "What? I'm not neurotic." But then I sat down, and over the next couple of days, I looked at my behavior and I remembered all the things I'd ever done. And I realized that I had gone the first 35 years of my life without realizing that I was a neurotic person. Now, has it made me a better person? Not really. I'm still kind of anxious and I still do lose my temper. But I at least know that the problem is me and not the rest of the world. Before I took this test, I thought everybody else in the world was an asshole. Now I realize that there's only one asshole. It's me, Chris Roddenberry, the neurotic person. So when you take that personality test, don't dismiss the results. Carefully think about what those results mean and see if you maybe need to think about what you might want to do in terms of becoming a more cooperative, a more conscientious, a less neurotic person. Any questions so far? I know I'm speeding along. I'm just always afraid that I'm not going to get all the information in. Okay. Now, can anybody tell me, do you see this picture, this ink blot over here to the left? Somebody please tell me what this picture looks like to you. This picture over here on the left, the picture on the right, not the kid with the violin, but the other picture that's just a blot of ink. Can somebody tell me, what do you think that picture looks like? What do you think that picture looks like? I know I've been talking for 30 minutes and haven't asked you a question, so you may be sleeping at the keyboard. So I'll give you a moment. Tell me if you can tell me what that is. Caleb says it looks like a butterfly. Absolutely, very common answer. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right, Caleb, Ivelis, Johanna, Matthew, any of you have a guess what it might look like? Very good, Caleb. A lot of people say it looks like a butterfly. Okay, maybe I caught you asleep at your keyboard. No big deal. Would it surprise you to know that some people say that looks like a mask? Would that surprise you to hear that some people think it looks like a mask? Okay, this is what's known as a projective test of personality. What I do is, see, the problem with self-report tests is some people lie on self-report tests because they know what the right answer is. Do you often lose your temper? Well, maybe I do, but I might not want to tell you that. So I could lie on that personality test because I know what the good answer is, right? However, so there's a different kind of test where we give you an ambiguous stimulus. We ask you to talk about it, and then I try to guess your personality based upon your results, right? The mind has a great way of organizing things and trying to interpret what occurs in the world. And it allows us to understand and interpret the world. If you've ever been outside on a sunny day and looked up at the clouds and decided that a cloud looked like an elephant or a cloud looked like a dog or whatever, your brain is organizing an ambiguous stimulus into an image of what it thinks it's seeing. And these ambiguous events allow us to demonstrate personality without our being aware of what we're doing, and people can then guess what our personality is. Now, I teach in the nursing school. I teach introductory psychology to nursing students a lot of times. And would it surprise you that when I ask my nursing students what this looks like, a lot of them say it looks like a pelvis. Now that I've mentioned that, can you see where someone might say that looks like a pelvis? Right? Does that look like a pelvis to you? Even if it doesn't, type a yes in so I'll feel better about my example. Okay, so the crazy thing is, on the first day, if I wanted, I could ask students to tell me what this looks like. And all the students who say it looks like a pelvis, I could guess and say, you know what, even though I haven't asked you, I'll bet you might be a nursing student. So I might be able to guess who my nursing students are by figuring out which ones say pelvis. That's, in a sense, a projective interpretation, or an interpretation of a projective test. Did you know I actually give a projective test the first day of class in all of my seated classes? So in a seated class, I have to get there first, and I unlock the room, and I then go sit at the front of the classroom behind my desk. And as my students walk in the first day, I usually greet them. Hey, what's up? Hey, how you doing? As each student walks in, I'll say hello to them. And you know what I notice? Some students won't even say hello back or make eye contact. They hurry to the back of the classroom, they sit down at a desk, and they look at their notes, and they don't even really make eye contact or talk to me. On the other hand, some students will say hi back and go sit down at their seats and still not pay that much attention to me. I'll say hi to some students and they'll say, hi, how are you doing? And they may even ask me a question. I hope you're doing well. They'll go sit down at their desk and they'll look up and smile at me. And we may even have a conversation, a short chat. You know what I can tell? Those students that won't make eye contact with me the first day when I say hi, those are my most introverted students. And those students that say hi back to me and start a conversation with me, I can guess that they are my most extroverted students. So in a sense, by simply saying hi and watching how a student reacts in the classroom, I can guess their personality. That's the idea behind a projective personality test. So some tests are projective in that I give you a situation or a picture and I allow you to talk about that picture and I try to guess your personality. Two common projective personality tests that are used. The one on the left that looks like a pelvis comes from a test called the Rorschach or the ink blot test. You folks may have heard the term ink blot test before, but it's basically 10 ink blot pictures. Some of them are colored, some of them are black and white. And what the psychologist does is they have the person describe what they see. And then there's a big book called the Exner book that has lots of descriptions of what people who have taken this test before have seen. And so the psychologist takes the pattern of what you've seen and tries to compare it to what's already been seen in people who are already known to be extroverted or introverted, or people who have depression or people who have anxiety problems. And what they do is they try to compare your statements with people who have taken the test before to figure out if you're extroverted or introverted, if you're depressed, if you're bipolar, or if you are an anxious personality. And so the inkblot test is a very old and famous form of a projective personality test. In class on Wednesday night, you're actually going to take a TAT test, a thematic apperception test. Now, where I'm going to give you a picture and I'm going to ask you to tell me a story about what's going on in that picture. And if you give me a really detailed story about what's going on in that picture, I will be able to guess your personality. So if you could, just for fun, do you see this picture of this boy looking at the violin? Can somebody tell me what's going on in this little boy's mind as he's looking at the violin? Go ahead and type a description in. Let's see if I can guess your personality or make you laugh by telling you what your personality is based on your description of this little boy. Okay? Now, while you're writing your story, I'll tell you a crazy thing. When I look at this ink blot, you may think I'm crazy, but I see two witches on top of a Christmas tree fighting. Tell me I'm crazy, but I swear to God, the middle part is a tree, and I say a Christmas tree, and those two things are witches with pointy hats and capes who are at the top of that tree arguing and fighting with one another. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Maybe I'm psychotic. But I swear to goodness, that's what that makes me see. Go ahead and type in the chat bar and let me know what you see with this little boy. Okay. What do you see with this little boy? Okay, as you type that in, I'm going to go on to the final slide. One personality trait that has become very interesting. Ooh, we have an answer. Caleb, he is upset that he has to practice and his mother is telling him to practice and he can't play till he does. Absolutely fantastic. That's a great interpretation, Caleb, a great interpretation. It looks like he doesn't want to play the violin and is forced by his parents. Fantastic. Caleb and Matthew, both of you are describing a story where this boy doesn't want to practice. Fantastic. Okay? And both of you are saying that his mother is forcing him to. So here's the deal. You might be higher in conscientiousness because you're telling a story where this boy is having to do something. He's required to do something. He has a rule to follow. He has a rule to follow. So maybe you're high in conscientiousness because you're focused on the fact that he has an obligation to do, right? On the other hand, some people see this story and tell me that this little boy is sad because he's not as good at the violin as he would like to be. And he's really disappointed because he's been trying to practice a song and he can't play it very well. People who say that are really interested in being good at things, and so they may be higher in what we call the need for achievement. And the test on Wednesday is going to measure your need for achievement. So if you tell me a story about his mom making him do it, you might be high in conscientiousness. But if you tell me a story about how he's disappointed because he's not good at it, I'll say you have a high need for achievement. So do you see how I'm trying to guess your personality based upon how you respond to that personality inventory? Now, I'm going to take a moment. Your book talks about it, and I'm going to talk about it. One personality trait that has become interesting here in recent years is this idea of narcissism, which is a personality trait marked by an inflated sense of importance, a need for attention and admiration, and a sense of entitlement. Sorry, I'm going to be judgmental for just a moment, and I'm not saying that they're not good artists or good presidents or politicians or whatever, or that they didn't keep gas prices low, or that their albums weren't the most awesome in the whole world. But two people who I think maybe have an inflated sense of importance, a need for attention and admiration, and a sense of entitlement are oh my goodness, oh my God, Kanye West and Donald Trump. And you know, honestly, most politicians, anybody that seeks public office and wants to be the leader of a country, or anybody that wants to be the biggest rap star in the world, of course, you'd have to be a little bit narcissistic to want those kinds of things, okay? But narcissism is a trait that is of interest to researchers these days. Now, narcissism, you'll notice that the Big Five test and the projective personality test that we take aren't going to measure them. Narcissism isn't considered a personality trait that most of us have, so you're not going to see it on your run-of-the-mill personality test. In fact, there are probably what we would call clinical tests that are designed to measure people with what we might call problematic personality styles. So there is a test for narcissism, but as a general rule, you don't take it unless you're sitting in front of a psychologist and they think you're a narcissism. Narcissism has not been widely discussed out of psychoanalytic circles until the 1980s, when researchers developed a test to assess narcissism as a personality trait in most people. And you know, the crazy thing is people who are narcissists have a very high sense of self, but are easily threatened by people who don't agree with their overinflated sense of themselves. So if you say something negative about Kanye or Donald Trump in public, you can be assured they will attack you back. They have big egos, but the egos are easily threatened by negative feedback. So as long as you're saying Kanye is the man, Kanye is going to be cool with you. But if you ever say that Eminem's a better rapper, Kanye is going to get super angry. If somebody sells more albums than Kanye, he's going to get super pissed. If somebody gets an award at the music awards and Kanye doesn't, remember how he got mad at Taylor Swift because she got an award that he wanted and he went up on stage and sort of showed his butt? He was demonstrating his narcissism. You notice how Slim Shady, baby, I'm the real Shady. All you others are just fake Slim Shadys, right? You notice how Donald Trump, anytime somebody says that he might not be telling the truth, or that he is lying, or that he wasn't the greatest president, he attacks them publicly in news and on social media. So he and Kanye both have very overly inflated sense of self, but it easily threatened, and their behavior is driven by a need to maintain this fragile sense of self. Okay? Now, because of social media, because of television, because we can see stars and how beautiful and glamorous they are, because we can go on Instagram and show pictures of ourselves and garner likes and loves and have people follow our blogs, because we can go on TikTok and make videos and people watch them, it's shown that that the level of narcissism that people have is started to rise. So you are more narcissistic than your parents were, who are more narcissistic than their parents were. And I would say, and I'm a little narcissistic too, because I have a Facebook account and lots of people like my vacation photos. Narcissism, I would say that social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and all these other forms of sharing where we can share pictures of ourselves, have shown us, have created a sense of narcissism in our society. And if you have a friend on Facebook, or if you're that kind of person on social media that posts 5 pictures of yourself with airbrushed and all kinds of, and dressing cool, you may be a little bit narcissistic. Now, don't feel judged, because I post selfies on Facebook too, and my wife says I'm narcissistic, and she's probably right, but whatever. But you might be a little bit narcissistic if you just need people to like you on Instagram, right? Now, there are 2 real different types of narcissism I want to mention to you, and I think that those people who are grandiose, they really think that they're the crap. But they think they're the crap because they really do feel good about themselves. Now, they still hate it when you say that they're not the greatest, but they really, really feel good inside about themselves. And I've heard stories about Kanye West, and even before he was a famous rapper, he used to brag about being an awesome rapper. And there's even this story that Dave Chappelle talks about, where he mentions how confident Kanye was about himself, even before he'd made his first record. Kanye, he doesn't like it when you talk negative about himself, but he really, really does feel good inside about himself. Now, I've read some biographies of Trump, and I know that his dad treated him really mean when he was a young kid. And again, I'm not dumping on Trump, and I'm not trying to say anything political, but I think Trump was made to feel bad about himself as a young man, and used wealth and power to get over these feelings of inferiority. And so he has a type of narcissism that is born from feelings of inferiority and vulnerableness. So even though he says he's the greatest, I think deep down inside, Donald Trump doesn't feel good about himself. So he needs you to tell him he's great so he can maintain this sense of confidence that his dad took from him early in life. So we don't actually have a narcissism test this week, but I do want you to know that this is an important personality trait that can ruin your relationships, that can get you into trouble, because narcissists sometimes break the law or cheat or do things that get them in trouble. And it's a personality trait that seems to be affected by the rise of social media. If anybody's interested in this concept on the relationship between narcissism and social media, I have a couple of videos from psychologists that will actually educate you about this. In fact, my office mate in graduate school, a fellow named Keith Campbell, is an expert on narcissism. He's down at the University of Georgia now, and he's published several books on narcissism, and he's the one that's demonstrated the link between social media and the rise of narcissism in the world. So you might find that interesting. Okay, one last 3 minutes, I'm going to tell you evaluate self-report tests and projective tests. Each one of them has advantages and each one of them have disadvantages. Now, the cool thing about self-report tests is that a self-report test is pretty direct. I ask you if you're an extrovert. Rather than trying to guess, I ask you if you're an extrovert. So self-report tests are, they directly measure your personality, and who knows you better than yourself? So a self-report test a lot of times can give you the best feedback because you are telling me who you are. Okay. However, these self-report tests are only as accurate as you want to be. So if for some reason you decide to lie, or you're embarrassed about telling me that you think you're the shit, or that you're a little bit self-involved, or that you have a bad temper, if you decide to lie to me, what can I do? If you lie to me, then the test is going to be inaccurate. So when you take the Big Five test, answer quickly, don't think too much, and don't worry about if the trait makes you sound like a bad person. Nobody has to see the scores, but just answer honestly. But in clinical settings, when people are looking for jobs, when people are in front of a clinical psychologist trying to diagnose if they're a narcissist that needs to be put into care, people are going to lie. And so deliberate deception, or some people just, when they think of themselves, they can't think of their bad qualities. You ever met somebody that can't think of the negative things that represent them? If you have desirability bias, or if you engage in deliberate deception, you're going to pretty much nullify the results on your self-report test. You're going to lie to me, okay? And your test is not going to be accurate. The cool thing about a projective test is, since you don't know what the test wants, it's harder for you to lie. In fact, the first day of class, when my students come into the class and sit down, they don't even know I'm evaluating their personality. So people are going to act more naturally. They're not going to try to fool me, and I'm going to be able, and so these tests aren't going to be as subject to deliberate deception. However, it's me interpreting your personality. You know what? Maybe that person that doesn't come in and talk to me the first day, maybe they just broke up with their boyfriend, girlfriend. Maybe somebody they were really close to died. Maybe they're sick and not feeling well. And that's why they respond the way they do. I don't know that if I'm trying to project their personality based on their behavior. So sometimes I might not accurately diagnose their personality. And honestly, the evidence on the reliability and validity of projective tests is not as high as we would like it to be. In fact, if you go to 2 different psychologists and have them give you the inkblot test, they are very likely to come up with a different description of what your personality is. And if 2 different psychologists use the same test to diagnose your personality and they come up with 2 different descriptions, then you have to ask yourself, is that test really accurate and reliable? Okay, you know what? That's all I had to say today. I wanted to talk a little bit about personality testing, to contrast that with Freud and the other people. So after having read this lecture, you're going to have a basic idea on what the motivations are that affect people and why people grow up the way they do. And then I want you to be able to appreciate the different ways in which we can actually measure personality. Don't forget to take the Big Five personality test. Bring your scores on Wednesday night. If you can take the test before you come, it'll be fun if we can all talk about our self-report test. And then in class, I'm going to give you a thematic apperception test, a TAT test, and we're going to see if your scores on the self-report test are the same as they are on the TAT test. And we're going to figure out which one of us has a bad temper, which one of us is conscientious, and which ones of us have a high need for achievement. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and I'm going to turn on some Slim Shady, and I'm going to lose myself in some Slim Shady. Or then again, I might even put on some Kanye and get myself pumped up with some narcissistic ego music. In the meantime, have a great day. Don't forget to do your discussion board, your homework, and join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. when we start talking about stress. And I know that you folks that are busy and have a lot of work are incredibly stressed out. So let's start talking about what stress is, how it affects our body, and then we'll begin to talk about how we can deal with these feelings of stress and make ourselves productive, more productive, and happier people. Okay? If you don't have any questions, take care, have a great day, and I do want to thank you for coming, and I hope to see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Take care.